Hello, everyone, and a very good morning, afternoon, and evening to you. I am Pooja Mathur, and I'll be moderating today's session alongside my colleagues from CoSAI. We have gathered here today to understand the principles for innovation in sustainable agri-food systems, what they are, how they add value, how they can be integrated into your projects, etc. This discussion is brought to you jointly by the Commission on Sustainable Agriculture Intensification, that is CoSAI, and the Asia Pacific Association of Agricultural Research Institutions, that is APAARI. And now that we are all settled and in the meeting, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce and invite Dr. David Shearer, Deputy Head of the CoSAI Secretariat, and Dr. Ravi Khetarpal, Executive Secretary at APAARI, to welcome our guests and speakers for today. Over to you, Dr. Shearer.
Thanks so much, Pooja, and welcome everyone. We are certainly very excited to be involved and partnering with APAARI today, and the Commission, the Secretariat of the Commission for Sustainable Agricultural Intensification has been working with APAARI for the past 12 months or so in terms of bringing forward a range of different dialogues. But we're particularly happy today to be really focused on key partners within Asia Pacific and key partners from the National Agricultural Research Systems and Ecosystems. So thank you very much for joining from throughout the Asia Pacific. I wanted to start just by painting a little picture of CoSAI, the Commission, and what we've uncovered, and give you an insight in terms of some of the efforts and focus that we'll have today. So the Commission for Sustainable Agricultural Intensification was set up in 2020 with the idea of bringing together a portfolio of evidence, research-based evidence that would support not only the growth in investment in innovation for future agri-food systems, but also how we would do that investment better to achieve a greater level of impact. One of the first things that the Commission set about doing was to understand the current landscape of investment in developing economies in the global South. And what that first study highlighted and unpacked was that overall, in developing economies, there's about $60 billion worth spent on innovation. And when the Commission talks about innovation, it's not only talking about innovation at the science and technology area, which many of the NARS are focused on, but it's also talking about innovation within policy, innovation within financial arrangements, and innovations within capability, and particularly institutional capability. And we know APAARI plays such an important role in that area. And when CoSAI looked at this area of innovation and that current level of investment of $60 billion, what came out incredibly strongly was the important role of national governments and national institutions in this space, both in terms of the level of investment. So about 60% of that investment is coming from national budgets. So not only the importance of the investment that's made, but of critical importance is the institutional role in terms of the research, the innovation, and impact pathways to ensure we're having a benefit from this work of innovation. And so national governments and national institutions are particularly important. And then the next piece of evidence looked at if we wanted to achieve particularly global food security, so SDG 2, and having agricultural systems make a positive contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, what's the gap that we need to fill? And the gap was identified about at $15 billion. But again, what came out really strongly was the critical nature and the importance of the national systems. And so combining those two things, both in terms of the current level of investment and the importance in terms of the implementation agencies, and also the important nature that national institutions play within this ecosystem, we're particularly pleased to be able to partner with APAARI in this dialogue to focus some discussions with these national institutions. And it's critical for us, and we're so pleased to be able to engage with you in this only brief session, but we hope there's work to be done afterwards. As I mentioned in some of my earlier comments, what we were very focused on is not necessarily just the more investment, but what was critical for CoSAI was better investment. And that better investment means a greater level of impact from that investment that we make in a number of different areas. And we're particularly focused on, sure, some of the usual impacts that we have through sustainable ag intensification, through productivity growth, etc. But what was particularly important for CoSAI was areas around within that social dimension that we know is sometimes underrepresented in some of these areas of investment. So areas such as equity was particularly important for CoSAI. But if we look at better investment, we need tools to be able to guide our investment and help us with that approach in terms of better investment. So CoSAI, through a number of different areas of work, were able to develop and unpack a number of different tools that can help guide investment, guide the implementation of that research and innovation to ensure that we're leading to a greater level of impact. And today, in this dialogue, we're going to talk about one piece of that tool that was developed through task force and expert groups involving both members from APAARI and other members from the region in terms of principles that enable that level of investment to not only grow, but to also have greater level of impact. And so today, through colleagues from the Commission, we'll hear about the development of those principles. But I think just as excitingly, we'll hear about both the piloting of those principles and also experience within the context of the Asia Pacific. And I think that's really important. So hopefully that's painted a bit of a picture for you, and I'll wrap up now just to give you some insight in terms of the broader role of the Commission and particularly what we're talking about today. And Ravi, over to you to follow up.
Thank you, Dave. Well, welcome everyone, and a special welcome to Thai colleagues, because today is Songkran, the Thai New Year festival, the celebration that embraces goodwill, love, compassion, and thankfulness, using water as the means of expression. And the best part is, what we are going to do today is what signifies Songkran. The word Songkran is derived from Sanskrit, meaning to move or step forward. So friends, we are going to move forward in a new domain of APAARI's working, which rather we are going to move forward a bit aggressively. What we started as APAARI CoSAI partnership about an year ago. And Dave has set the stage. He said everything about what CoSAI has done and how the outputs of CoSAI really can be taken up by APAARI is what we really intend to do. Now, CoSAI and APAARI have been engaged, and now we are going to marry. I'm not saying we are going to marry CoSAI. After being engaged, now we are going to marry the principles of innovation developed by CoSAI in APAARI's regular working. We are trying to see how best we can embed or absorb in our working. This importance of innovation, I may not highlight much. The UN Food System Summit has said all about it, and CoSAI really came at the right time, given how there's a lack of investment in agriculture innovation at a time when we are pushing from tropical agriculture platform, the agriculture innovation system across the countries. But we don't have a principles for innovation there. So that is where CoSAI work, saw the importance, is going to fill in the gray area to really keep the innovation in agri-food system going ahead. How it can go ahead in the region, it is with the NARS. They are the key players. And NARS, who have formed APAARI, they are actually going to really help us meet the mission of APAARI, strengthening agri-food research and innovation system in the region. Now, CoSAI has produced the principles, as was mentioned by Dave, as one of the tools. The aim is to enhance the impact of innovation, as he mentioned. Here, what I say is, keeping in view this importance of the agri-food system in the region, APAARI seriously aim to encourage the uptake of principles by NARS, our National Agriculture Research System actors, and we would like them to encourage them to champion it in their countries. We are trying to take the relay from CoSAI to make the outputs applied in the region, as I mentioned before. And here NARS have to play a very crucial role. It was in a short time we organized this, and I see out of 22 NARS in APAARI, more than 15 have joined. This is a very encouraging and a pleasant surprise to all of us. However, we have kept the time for 1 hour, which means I think we can get a summary of what we really want to do. This won't be the end of the dialogue. This is a beginning of the dialogue. I will call it is dialogue number 1 in the series of dialogue we are going to have in small groups, 101, and so on, to make sure that our objectives are achieved. So in the next about 45-50 minutes, Scarlett, Pooja, and Jonathan will run the program, and they'll make sure that you get a glimpse of the importance, potential of the principles, and how to use the principles, interactions with our NARS members. And this is definitely going to be useful for NARS members who are designing innovation projects, who are doing evaluation, who are in decision making, and so on. So I would like to stop here. I would like to thank each and every NARS members, and my very special thanks to Dr. Julia Crompton, head of the Secretariat of CoSAI, Dave Shearer, Deputy Head, and the very able team with Scarlett and Jonathan, and I would like to acknowledge the support from my APAARI team also. Thank you, NARS members. Thank you, CoSAI. Thank you, one and all. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Ketarpal and Dr. Shearer, for setting the background so insightfully by outlining the investment landscape and the partnership scenario. I would now like to invite Ms. Scarlett Crawford, Project Officer from the CoSAI Secretariat, who will set the stage for you with important details relating to the principles for innovation in sustainable agri-food systems. Ms. Crawford, over to you.
Thank you, Pooja. Hi, everyone. Thanks for coming along today. It's great to see the different representation from the NARS groups that Ravi talked about. So my name is Scarlett, and I'm a project officer from the CoSAI Secretariat. And today I'm going to start the dialogue by introducing the principles for innovation in sustainable agri-food systems. New slide, please. So the principles were developed by a multi-stakeholder task force of experts, and they were developed as a tool to help guide and track innovation in sustainable agri-food systems. And so Pooja is just going to put a poll on screen now so that we can have a look at whether your organizations or you are using any sorts of tools to specifically guide your innovations now. And so while we wait for the results of the poll, we can have a look at today's agenda. Okay, so next slide, please. So I'm going to take you through the rationale for the principles today and why they're not a small set of metrics or indicators. I'm then going to have a brief look at the principles themselves and how they can add value to your organization. And so do we have the poll?
Scarlett, if you can just give me 1 minute. There is some issue with since another device has been logged in. I would request Kharat to kindly start the poll.
That's no worries at all. That's no worries. Well, anyway, we can move on. So new slide, please. And yes, before we get into the presentation, as Dave said, innovation in this context goes beyond just science and technology. It includes other facets of innovation such as research, policy, institutions, finance and development projects. And so it's important to keep this in mind as we're going through the presentation and as we're thinking about innovation and the principles. Okay, so new slide, please. So let's have a look at the rationale for the principle and why they were first developed. So again, as Dave mentioned in the beginning, and in previous dialogues that we've hosted between APAARI and CoSAI, our first commission study, the Innovation Investment Study, which my colleague Jonathan, he should put this in the chat for you now so that you can have a look at it later if need be. Well, this study had two major findings. Firstly, it found that in general, data related to innovation objectives is quite patchy. And this meant that the innovation investment landscape lacks transparency. And then if we have a look at the graph at the bottom of the screen here, we can see the data from the second major finding. And that finding was about the fact that innovations promoting environmental and social objectives are severely underfunded. So in the case of government spending, we can see that only 6% of innovations have explicit environmental goals and only 2.5% have social and environmental goals. So if we want to meet the SDGs and if we want to make the future of our planet a place that we want to live in for everyone, we're going to have to change this. So we have both of these issues that arise, the lack of transparency and the lack of investment into sustainable and equitable innovation. So what can we do about this? How can we encourage better and more transparent innovation? And how can we measure this? And so here's where the principles come in. So they are a tool for you as research and innovation managers to help you actually include these objectives in your work. They're a specific guidance so that we can get beyond the 6 and 2.5% mark. And then on the transparency front, using the principles actually allows your organizations to track your objectives and to contribute to the wider transparency of the innovation landscape. New slide, please. So that's a little bit of background as to why the principles. And now we can look at why the principles are in this particular form, why they're not a small set of outcome metrics. New slide. So firstly, the metrics needed for different types of innovations are so variable that it's actually very difficult to use a small number of metrics to compare different innovations. So if we think about an example of an innovation that is breeding a more water efficient rice strain, and we try to compare that innovation to a new policy that is, for example, targeting social inclusion, we can see that there's going to be a lot of difficulty in using common metrics or indicators to compare these two. And this difficulty in using these metrics is also true of comparing different types of innovation contexts and the different stages in the innovation process, as well as difficulties in comparing different types of accountability. So for example, the indicators that meet requirements of upwards accountability to funders and donors are going to be different to the indicators needed for downwards accountability to innovation recipients. It's also not feasible to use a small set of metrics because it's really difficult to directly link innovations to specific impacts. So we know that innovations, they're always interacting with their context and other external factors, and it makes it really difficult to isolate the causality between the innovation and the specific impact. And this gets further complicated because there's generally long lag times between implementing the innovation and scaling and then seeing the impact of the innovation. So these are the main reasons why we decided to develop principles as opposed to a set of metrics. But I do want to highlight here that in no way are we saying that metrics shouldn't be used. We definitely think that metrics, and within the principles, sub-principle 2.2 highlights metrics as a critical part of innovation processes. Okay, so new slide, please. Okay, so let's have a look at the principles. And my colleague will also drop the principles into the chat so that you can have a more in-depth look at them as we go, but they're also on screen here. So basically we have 8 different principles. The first 4 guide innovation processes and the last 4 guide innovation outcomes. So if we look at the process principles, the first principle relates to developing a clear theory of change. The second principle relates to transparency and using evidence-based decisions. Principle 3 is centered around inclusive and ethical processes. And then the fourth and final process principle pushes innovators to consider the potential trade-offs and possible unintended effects of their innovations. New slide. And then let's have a look at the outcome principles. So principle 5 is related to food and nutrition security and health. Principle 6 looks at sustainably using and managing natural resources. Principle 7 is centered around economic opportunities and livelihoods. And the final outcome principle, principle 8, is related to equitable and adaptive food systems. So this is the principles in a nutshell. And new slide, please. And so now we can have a look at how the principles will actually add value to you as researchers and innovators, and how they can add value to your NARS organizations. So new slide, please. So previously in the presentation, I mentioned that the principles are beneficial because they're a tool that help you to include environmental and social objectives in your innovation. And they're also beneficial because they help build the transparency of the innovation landscape. But they also have other benefits. And one of these benefits is that they can help organizations stay ahead of the curve. So the principles are becoming more widely known, and they've already been tested by influential organizations such as the FAO and USAID. So that means that they're already contributing to setting future norms and standards. So we could say that in applying the principles, your organization is sort of staying ahead of the curve and keeping up with best practice. And then we can have a look at benefits that are more specific at the organization level, or continue those sort of benefits. The principles allow your organizations to compare different types of innovation. So going back to the example of rice and policy, we're able to compare these types of innovation. They allow you and your organizations to concretely demonstrate that your research and innovations are contributing to sustainable and equitable agri-food systems. And they also allow you to track your progress here to show that, previously you weren't meeting these objectives or you weren't contributing here, but now you can see a progression in the way that you are contributing. And then more specifically on a personal level, for you as research and innovation managers, they allow you to undertake best practice and to demonstrate that you're doing so. And again, you can track your progress here and demonstrate that you are progressing in implementing best practice. And then finally, the principles are accompanied by resources, including a metrics database and guidance for each principle. So there are tools just for supporting you here. So that's a little bit about the principles and their value. And so now I'm going to hand over to Pooja to introduce the next section. Thank you, Pooja.
Thank you, Ms. Crawford. Yeah. Yes,
No.
sorry. I would now like to call upon Dr. Nora Omot, Policy Coordinator at APAARI, for a round of question and answers that may help clear some of the queries that you might have. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Nora.
Thank you, Pooja.
All right, so my first question to you is, how have the principles been beneficial to your organization and how have they added value to your work?
Thanks, Pooja. So one benefit we observed at APAARI was in terms of the usefulness of the principle as a tool that can guide us to check our existing planning processes and outcomes with those being developed and shared by CoSAI. And this has helped us to see that the actions we take and the outcomes we deliver in the agri-food systems are both sustainable and also socially acceptable. For instance, when we were applying the principles, we noted that some of the principles were not captured in our processes. So that is a good thing that we can take note of this when we're discussing internally, but also with partners when we are thinking and planning on developing new projects, and also discussing and reporting on the outcomes of the projects that we currently have. Another benefit that we saw from this principle is that they provide a step-by-step guide or checklist that project managers can use when developing and managing projects. And with the project management, this is important, especially that we could identify corrective actions that needs to be taken to address gaps or issues, and making adjustments to our projects and processes so that we deliver on the sustainable and socially accepted outcomes. Another benefit was in terms of the principles are being used as a tool for guiding our monitoring and evaluation of the project outcomes. And this is useful, especially the sub-principles, especially the ones that are focusing on the outcomes, provide that set of areas that we can focus on doing this. Additional benefit that we see at a generic but higher level for APAARI is fortifying its mission on strengthening agri-food research and innovation system in the region, where countries are at different levels of growth and development. The region will have a clear benchmark on how it is going to look at agri-food system more efficiently. So in terms of value adding to our work, the principles added value by way of guiding us to consider an approach that is strategic, as well as socially acceptable when we develop projects, manage projects, and do the monitoring and the evaluation. Thanks, Pooja.
Thank you, Dr. Nora. My second question to you would be, how could you foresee integrating the principles into your current research and innovation project systems?
Thanks, Pooja. We observed that the principles provide a very useful guide that ensures that the actions, whatever activities or projects that we conduct, and whether it is also coming from programs or overall from organizations, should be done in a transparent and ethical way with clear pathways and goals towards sustainable outcomes in the agri-food system. So along that line, we foresee a number of ways that the principles could be integrated into our current research and innovation project systems. One of these ways is that we can and we will adopt the principle as a tool for guiding our project plannings and management. And this we see is very useful, especially when we are involving a lot of partners in developing projects, that we could use this as a guide. Another area is that we can develop a checklist with the principles and sub-principles. So as Scarlett had said, it is useful for monitoring the progress made into the outcomes of the agri-food innovation system. So this is a useful checklist that we can use when we're developing our projects and when we're managing our projects also. And this also in terms of developing indicators for the principles that we apply in the projects that we have. So in addition to the above, we at APAARI will be creating more awareness on the principles and metrics developed by CoSAI. As Dr. Ravi has also mentioned in his opening statement, we'll be doing this amongst our NARS partners and stakeholders. And we encourage the APAARI community to test the principles, to apply it, and to provide feedback on it. So thank you, Pooja, over to you.
Thank you for such an elaborate and insightful detailing, Dr. Nora. I would now like to play a short video that we received from Dr. Miyukiyama, Program Director at Japan International Research Center for Agricultural Sciences, where she shares her inputs on behalf of JIRCAS on the application of the principles. So kindly give me 1 minute and I will quickly present it for you.
'Hello, this is Miyukiyama, Program Director of Information at JIRCAS, Japan International Research Center for Agriculture Sciences. First of all, I have to apologize that I cannot attend the seminar during its session. And thank you instead to give me an opportunity to make a few comments via video message. JIRCAS is a national research and development agency under the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Fisheries of Japan. We formulate and then undertake projects under the 5-year medium to long-term plan, which stipulates government's policy priorities. For example, currently we are at the second year of the 5th medium to long-term plan, with focus on the 3 research priorities. 1. Development of agriculture technology for climate change, resource recycling, and environmental conservation. 2. Technology development towards building a new food system with improved productivity, sustainability, and resilience. And 3. Strengthening function as an international hub for providing strategic information on agriculture, forestry, and fisheries, and mobilizing new research partnership. In developing the projects, we use a specific in-house template and logical framework which guides project members to elaborate project objectives, expected outcomes, and propose measures to deliver such outputs to target beneficiaries to maximum social outcomes and impacts. Every fiscal year, or even at any timing of the year as necessary, we review and evaluate the progress of the projects and revise activities. Our in-house project template allows us to identify which specific SDGs as a project tries to address. In turn, we have not used deliberate or explicit principles or tools to include specifically environmental and social objectives. Given the increasing importance of delivering project outputs to address interconnected issues of the food system, especially trade-offs and unintended consequences, these proposed principles for innovation in sustainable agri-food system should be very useful for guiding effective project formulation. In turn, I assume not only JIRCAS, but other national agriculture research institutions should have own project development protocols. So replacing these existing formats and templates with completely new systems may be difficult and not feasible. So it will be appreciated if such principles can be readily customized or suggested as a checklist to supplement what National Agriculture Research Institution already have. This is my comments. Thank you again and good luck for the success of the seminar and the discussion.
Thank you for that. Well, Dr. Miyuki isn't here, but we would like to thank her for that input. And we think it's important to, reiterate what she's saying in terms of the fact that the principles are here to sort of supplement your existing project systems and to, gather the fact that a lot of you are already doing work on environmental and sustainability outcomes and objectives, but they're an important tool to sort of gather all of this together in one place and be able to demonstrate that quite clearly. And so now we'll go to a couple of questions. And I'd like to call on Dr. Margaret from the Department of Agriculture in Thailand. And I would like to ask you, Dr. Margaret, how you think the principles could strengthen your organization's processes in research and innovation to help you deliver better agri-food system outcomes. So just, you have a succinct 2 minutes to give your response, and yeah, take it away, Dr. Margaret.
Yes, thank you, Scarlett. And I will be very brief because I'm also learning. I'm not yet very versed on this principle that you are presenting now. But for sure, all NARS have this kind of principles when we do research. This would be a very good, as Nora said, it would be a very important guideline or guide on how we could really strategize to make sure that the plan or the project plans and are socially acceptable before we proceed to implementation. So these are in theories, are of course, in theory, this will be very important as a guideline. But in practical sense, when we implement, it suits specific conditions within the system, within the national research system. And so I'm not sure what kind of principle you are introducing to us right now. Because of course, as a research organization, we have these plans, project plans, and then indicators, no, and how we measure it. I did not hear about impact assessment. I'm not sure if impact assessment is also included here, not only monitoring and evaluation, but also on the impact assessment. So our researchers has to have this skill, yeah. And if APAARI or if CoSAI would like to pursue in introducing such kind of principles, then we need some capacity buildings for our young scientists, particularly, so that well, they are young and they're starters to be researchers, scientists. So we need some capacity building on these regards, and a webinar as this would be very relevant and very important. So looking forward to the progress made on this kind of initiative, and thank you for convening such kind of important webinar. And of course, this could be a guideline. We can call it a module sometimes, right? A module or some kind of something that we could follow.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. As Nora also already mentioned a benefit. Nora is very good at this because she's been working at that. But if you are a scientist, then of course you need to also improve your skills in this kind of principles. Thank you very much for this opportunity to give some insights. Back to you, Scarlett.
No worries. Thank you, Dr. Margaret. Yes, we are definitely here in the CoSAI Secretariat to help you with any questions that you have in implementing, or if you need demonstrations. And in terms of impact assessment, it definitely is an important part of innovation processes, and the principles don't deny that. I think where the principles come in, they sort of come in prior to impact assessment, and they're looking at how you develop your innovations, how you develop your projects. Are you considering all of these different potential outcomes in terms of equity and environment? And are you undertaking these different processes to ensure that when you get to the later stages and you are looking at impact, you have these objectives clearly marked out, and you have undertaken these processes clearly so that your impact assessments can be strengthened. So we definitely agree that impact assessment is important, but we think that defining everything and making things extremely clear in the planning and in the planning sort of phases of your innovations and projects are also very important. So yeah, thank you for your contribution. Now I would like to call on Dr. Ernesto Brown from the Philippines, from the Socioeconomic Research Division of the Philippine Council for Agriculture, Aquaculture, and Natural Resource Research and Development. And Dr. Brown, I would also like to ask you the same question. So how do you think that the principles could strengthen your organization's processes to help you deliver better agri-food system outcomes?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Scarlett, and good afternoon to everyone. Well, just like our Thai colleague, we are still on, learning. We are not yet very familiar with, well, the principles are not new, but the whole thing, as you package it, as mentioned by our Thai colleague, we need some capacitation on this. But I have some idea already, because I have, we actually tested this in one of our projects, just so we would have, sense of, the utility of this tool. And based on that very limited experience applying it on just one of our projects, I would say that really applying the principles will definitely guide Picard, my organization, to have more sustainable agri-food system objectives and outcomes. As mentioned also by our Thai colleague, many of the principles are not new to the NARS. Picard is basically the apex organization, the Philippine Council for Agriculture, Aquatic, and Natural Resources Research and Development is the apex organization as far as the whole NARS, the whole network. And implicitly or explicitly, those principles actually constitute or are somehow embodied in the goals that we pursue as an organization, and the whole R&D system in agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources. Principles like, of course, contribution to food and nutrition security, contribution to economic opportunities and livelihood, contribution to sustainable resource management, and many others. There are 8 principles. Actually, the first 4 principles, what I like with the way you package this is the first 4 principles are concerned with processes, planning, for example, more of looking at the design of the project or of the program, from the theory of change, the design itself, whether it's inclusive, and so on and so forth, up to the 4th principle. And then the 5th up to the 8 principles all refer to the outcomes. These outcomes are the very reasons actually why we are pursuing research and development activities in agriculture, aquatic, and natural resources. It is very good that this initiative was able to put all of these 8 principles together and provided at least a qualitative metrics. Earlier, Scarlett is trying to distinguish principles versus metrics, or why principles and not metrics. I don't know if we really have to make such distinction, because what I see is the strength of this system that you have is you have the principles and the metrics that go with it. So because this is important, so that we can gauge the extent by which these principles define our priorities and the R&D activities that we pursue. This is very important to organizations like PAARI, because as I've said, we are actually the Science and Technology Planning Council in Agriculture, Aquatic, and Natural Resources. We also program and allocate funds for R&D. In other words, we basically set the R&D direction in AANR. And we also monitor and evaluate R&D projects. Now, I look at this scoring system as it can serve both as a planning tool and a monitoring and evaluation tool. This can be applied at different levels in the organization, like for example, from the core plan or the corporate plan, to see the extent by which the organizational plan is adherent to the 8 principles and identify specific areas that have to be strengthened in case there is weak adherence.
Dr. Brown?
Yes?
Sorry, we're just running a little bit over time. So.
Yes, so it can also be applied to the banner programs as well as specific R&D projects. So what is good about this scoring system is that it provides the mechanism by which we can gauge the extent by which an R&D organization is adhering to the principles of sustainable food, agri-food system in terms of its plans, programs, projects, or as Dr. David Shearer pointed out earlier, in terms of the investments that we have. So I really would like to congratulate CoSAI and APAARI for this excellent initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brown, for that. Yes, as we said, that the CoSAI Secretariat, we're here to assist in this capacity building whenever sort of necessary. So feel free to reach out to Jonathan and I put our email addresses in the one-pager that was sent to you this morning. And now I'll hand over to Jonathan, who's going to give a small demonstration about how the principles can be used in innovation projects. So take it away, Jonathan.
Thank you, Scarlett, and thank you to all the speakers and participants so far for your valuable contributions. So you were speaking also about the necessary capacity building, and I hope to give you a little bit of an introduction on how to specifically apply the principles to your research or innovation project in the next few minutes. So as you can see on this on the screen here, that there are 5 different steps. The first step is to choose your research or innovation project, followed by planning your assessment. These 2 steps are fairly short. After this comes the most important step, also the most time-consuming one, where you actually assess your project against the principles. After that, if you have several projects that you have applied the principles to, you can get an aggregate score across the different projects for each principle. These 4 steps take roughly 3 hours to complete if you're unfamiliar with the principles. And the last and also very important step is communicating your results. And I will get to that later. So as a first step, you choose your research or innovation project, and you can score either one project or a themed cluster of projects. And a themed cluster should have similar objectives and should also be implemented in a similar enough context so that you can score them at once. More guidance on that is provided in our materials. I want to make clear that when we speak about innovations, we don't only mean technological innovations, but of course also policy, financial, institutional, or social innovation, as well as innovative business practices. The second step is planning your project assessment. And ideally, you need at least 2 people to do the assessment to have a more objective scoring. And these 2 people should ideally also include one person that takes strategic decisions on the intended agri-food system outcomes of your project. As already mentioned before, you can apply the principles at different stages of research or innovation. So in the beginning, there might be more of a planning and design tool, while they become more of a review and assessment tool of your project later on. You can also use them for to complement impact assessments. Of course, as an organization, you might also have other aspects that you want to integrate in impact assessments. These principles are meant to be integrated within the processes of your organization, ideally. So, for instance, in annual reviews or planning meetings. Coming to the most important step, step 3 is applying the principles to your innovation. And on the left side, you see principle number 1, and you would take each principle, go through the sub-principles and score each sub-principle according to the different scores that you can see on the right-hand side here. So if you have not carried out any of your activities in line with the principles, naturally you would get a score of 0. Then you get a score of 1 if you have carried out some of your activities in line with the principle. You get a score of 2 if you've regularly and systematically collected evidence on the application of the principle. And you get a score of 3 if you have regularly and systematically collected and analyzed information on the principle, but if you have also implemented needed changes coming out of the assessment. So just to give you a very quick example here, this is a section of the scoring template that you would use when you score a project. And as you can see here, you have the principle on the top, and you would score each sub-principle. And I want to go to the last row here. Sub-principle 1.3, reflexive monitoring and evaluation. And you can see the answer here that you need to give evidence and justification for why you have given a certain score. So in this case, a score of 3 was, so the highest score was put. And the answer is we routinely undertake monitoring, and our first evaluation is coming up in a few weeks. We provided ourselves a score of 3 because our initial impact assessment instigated changes in the project design, and because our project will be adapted again after our next evaluation. So the reason why they received a score of 3 is because they've already implemented changes based on the principles. A very important aspect here also, which you can see here in bold, is that the evidence provided must be very specific. So they refer to specific pages or sections of documents that they have provided together with the scoring template. In terms of scoring the overall principle, the general rule is that the overall principle score is your lowest non-zero score of all the sub-principles. So on the right-hand side, you can see that we have 2 3s and 1 2, and the lowest non-zero score is a 2. So the overall score of the principle would be a 2. Yeah, the scoring is fairly straightforward. We don't have a lot of time now, but I can promise you that our guidance materials are a lot more detailed and will give you good instructions. Then the 4th step comes, in which you can then take the projects you have scored or the themed clusters you have scored, and you can get an aggregated score for your entire department or program or organization. And for that to happen, all of the individual projects or clusters need to be scored. And then you arrive at an aggregated score in proportion to the project budgets. So larger projects in terms of budget will have a stronger influence on the result of the score. Most importantly, the aggregated scores are not aggregated across principles, but you get an aggregated score for each principle. So you would have, for instance, for your entire department, you could get an aggregated score for principle 1 then another one for principle 2, and so on. The calculations are also not too difficult, but we also have a template, an Excel sheet that will do the calculations for you. You just have to put the budgets and the principal scores in there. And the last, and of course, one of the most important steps also is communicating your results. In the early stages, this might be more of an internal exercise because you are still learning and adapting your project. And later on, this might turn also to external reporting. And depending on your organization and your project, you can decide to do this through a meeting or a workshop or a report. This is entirely up to you. Thanks a lot. And I believe that Ravi will provide us with some concluding words to this workshop. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Can you unshare your PowerPoint, Jonathan? So that yeah. Thanks a lot. Okay, friends, we had a very compact 1 hour, a bit more, to really look at the principles, the importance, and how you apply it. And we got some views from NARS. So this is all very encouraging. First point of encouragement is like more than 15 NARS of the 22 really showed interest. This is a good sense of encouragement for APAARI as such to move forward. And there will not be time right now to discuss on the questions and answers on the technical aspects of the principles. The point is how we carry forward. And as you all may be knowing, CoSAI apparently is going to close its shop by the end of April. And we are lucky they extended for 1 month. So, but it doesn't mean CoSAI's principles or the outputs are going to be nowhere. As I mentioned in the beginning, we are going to take it up. We'll be working actively with the CoSAI staff, all of whom you have met. And we are finding a way how we work more intensely with them when they are trying to vanish away as individuals, not as a concept or principle. So with that background, I may like to say APAARI would like now to have more discussions or deliberations on this, as was pointed out by Khun Margaret from Thailand. They need capacity building, highlighted by Ernest Brown also, and importance was given by Miyuki. And like everyone showed, that principles are useful. Those who applied a little bit, they found it very useful and easy to apply. Others showed interest to apply. Some said they may be having principles, but they may need to know exactly what these principles look like. So with that fact, I think very soon we are going to have another webinar. We'll get back to you on that. And before I close and before I thank everyone, I may like to quickly call Dave to give his observations in 1 or 2 lines, and then followed by Julia, the key player behind this. Dave, over to you.
Yeah, thanks very much, Ravi. Really to iterate how powerful this dialogue's been in terms of hearing from the NARS, in terms of that principles are a key part of how you are already planning, evaluating and monitoring the very significant investments you make in future agri-food systems in your country. And for us, it's been also really pleasing to hear that these principles could add value to what you're already doing. And CoSAI's key intent with the evidence portfolio that we're bringing together was to add value to the capacity that you're already implementing in country. So it was a fantastic dialogue, I thought. Really great to hear not only from Scarlett and Jonathan in terms of the very professional presentation around the principles and the piloting, but much more pleasing to hear from national partners of APAARI in terms of how it's being used and how it could be used even more valuably in the future. So thanks, Ravi, and thanks everyone. And I think I'm going to put Julia on the spot now, Ravi.
Yeah, please. Julia.
I think actually Julia had to jump off the call because she has
No
another
problem.
meeting.
No problem, Scarlett.
So let me just, Ravi, if I may, just take up the opportunity to say, Jonathan did allude to this and Scarlett did allude to this, and with that mention I had in terms of, you know, really value adding, you know, it's been insightful in terms of the toolkits that are developing, and I just want to mention again and to be clear with national partners that there is guidance being developed, guidance that's been developed that is very practical, and so you can work with that guidance within your project teams, within your departments, or even across the whole national ecosystem of research. And so, you know, it's really important that, yes, we can have these broad discussions, but what CoSAI is doing is developing practical guidance, practical tools that you can use in your situation. And let me finish there, Ravi, and throw back to you.
Thank you, Dave. You simplified my reflections I wanted to give, and thank you so much. And my job is just now to give a special vote of thanks, first of all, to CoSAI and the whole CoSAI team, and especially to Scarlett and Jonathan for really making a wonderful job here. Then to my APAARI colleagues, Nora, Pooja, and Martina. And of course, I'm really grateful to all the NARS members who joined. That's for something we want to see more and more in the coming days. Please feel free to get back to us if you want a one-on-one discussion, if you want a group kind of a discussion or a webinar or a training. And let me tell you, if you don't come back to us, we are going to get back to you. We'll roadmap, our plans, our operational activities. So either of us will be chasing each other. So we are going to be caught jointly somewhere, and we are going to push it forward. With this, I would like to stop here. Thank you, one and all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ravi. May I please request everyone for a quick group picture, and so that we can have something to remember this meeting by. And I would request everyone to kindly switch on their cameras and just let us see who all are, you know, here amongst us. Amazing, great. Another minute. All right.
You can smile with a mask. Yeah.
Okay, great. 3, 2, 1. All right, I have a picture. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, and happy Songkran once again. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.
Happy Songkran.
Thank you. Thanks, Dave. Big job. Big.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Margaret.